This is INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Don't underestimate
the power
of a single
conversation.
it could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chatline.
conversations that matter.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to INC Radio Chatline. And today we're talking about what makes a good story. And I know someone who's with me tells really good stories most of the time, right, Arnie?
I don't know. I don't know if I have to tell good stories, if I really do, but I guess.
Think you do. I think you do. Your stories are pretty entertaining, but not just stories like conversational stories like in TV and movies and books. Trying to think of other mediums of different stories that we kind of, maybe even music. I think music can also be a good storyteller if you're crafty like that. Some artists come to mind, like Taylor Swift or I don't know who else, but stuff like that. So for you, Arnie, what's your favorite, I guess, way of storytelling? Whether you're the listener or well, I know that you love telling stories in general, but maybe just receiving.
So, I mean, like if someone's telling me a story, I want it to be entertaining, and descriptive, like, and but then even though it's descriptive, it's not one of those that just drags on forever and ever. Because you know how some people like, oh, to cut the story short, but then they keep adding stuff, so it's not really cutting it short, right? So I do like people who, one, has a point to their story, and two, also, where it's, especially if it's not a serious topic, but make it interesting so that you'll just want to keep listening, or you'll want to ask them questions after they finish telling you a story like that. I think that's what I like. What about you?
I don't know. I feel like I'm partial to. Of course, I'm big on conversations. I will have conversations all the live long day. I could go a whole day. That's why I like road trips, because when you're on a road trip, you're in an enclosed space with people, and there's not. I mean, you can listen to music for most of the way, but if you're with good company, you could have conversations that last like the full. Let's say it's 5 hours. I'm going to Chicago. I've had conversations that literally lasted that long, just because of different stories that we're telling. But
You
I
know,
personally like TV kind of
mm,
storytelling. Yeah.
oh, see, I wish I had conversations that lasted that long, because whenever I do road trips, and this is why I don't like road trips, right? So I'm the one driving, but everybody else is sleeping. Like nobody wants
Oh,
to
I know.
talk. They all just want to sleep. Even if it's like in the middle of the day, it's not even nighttime, it's daytime. I'm like, keep me
Knocked
up.
out.
And so, yeah. And then like with my nephews, because they grew up in an age where I think social media was so prevalent, and devices and everything, they're always on their device. So I would like have to force them to put it down and have a conversation with me.
But they're good about it. Like when you guys go on road trips together.
Well, usually they're the good ones who don't fall asleep, because they'll just stay up. They don't like doing the whole napping thing. But when my sisters come with me on road trips, they're always sleeping. Sometimes they'll be awake for possibly like 30 minutes, maybe to an hour, and then they'll just knock out. And then we've gone like 6 hours already. They'll kind of wake up like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, even if I said no, it's not like you're gonna wake up to drive. So, but it is what it is.
I feel like with stories in general, the ones that kind of take me off guard is when they lead with something a little dramatic. Like it's, or not even just dramatic, but it's so out of context that you have to hear more. You're just like, wait, what? It's like,
Yes,
what did you just say?
yes. But then it gets disappointing when all of a sudden it really had nothing to do with what the story they were telling.
Yeah, that's
Like
kind of
you think it's juicy, you think it's something that, is worth your while, and then all of a sudden you're like,
total left
man,
field.
that was like a waste of time.
Most of the time, it's not like that for me though. It's kind of when it comes full circle and you get just like that mind blown moment. Like, Oh, that's why. Yeah. That happened a couple times. That happened a couple of times to me this week. Just like, wait, what? It's like a double take. For everything, not just for conversations, for like TV shows, movies. But again, I prefer TV shows. TV shows storytelling to me. I don't know. Do you prefer movies over TV shows, Arnie?
You know, I think it's if it's I don't know. I don't think I have a preference because I do like
Mm.
different TV shows. And but I don't watch TV. Well, most of the TV I watch is not really like a TV show. So I do
Oh,
more of the home and garden kind of a thing. So there's not
oh,
really a
okay.
story. So they're like doing the
Yeah.
do it yourself thing. Or there's this other show where they go to the flea market and buy stuff and then try to sell it, you know? So it's not really a story, even though they try to incorporate like people's lives into the story, but it's more of doing things like that. So um, the only time I actually watch anything with a story, I think would be more like TV. I mean, like movies, you know,
Mm.
like the Hallmark Channel and things like that, where you know they have different movies, but not really TV shows.
Okay. Okay. So I'll play off that because I'll explain mine later with TV shows. But for you with movies, what what engages you, and then what tunes you out? I'll ask that. I feel like it's
Okay,
gonna be the same with the conversation, but let's see.
no, it's not the same with the conversation. So what like when I'm scrolling through, whether it's through Netflix or through you know like my different apps and stuff, when I
Mm.
see like one the title first of all, but then also the picture of what's being presented. Okay, if the celebrity is good looking, yes, I will stop on that and you know and watch it. But if it's one of those like I don't know who the celebrity is or they're not that interesting looking, I'm like, no, I'll just keep scrolling.
Aw. So you're always going for the A-listers, basically. The A-listers with
Not
like
necessarily A-listers, because there's some people
mm,
like I didn't know who they were, but then all of a sudden, you know, I saw them in a movie. I'm like, oh, they're pretty hot. And then it made me want to watch all their shows. Like I okay, like this.
okay.
I don't know if you ever watched that movie, Sweet Home Alabama, which is like back
No,
in the
I know that's like a class. That's supposedly a classic, right? That's supposed to
yes.
be. Yeah,
And,
I have
and
not though.
so the guy that you know that she was trying to avoid, he was really good looking, and so you know of course everyone was hoping she would go for the guy from New York, but the ones that she liked was the one from the country, and he was good looking to the point where after I was done with that movie I would Google him and see what other movies he was in. And that's how I would go watch my movies.
Okay, so that's my mental note that if I ever make a movie, I have to make sure that I have a very good looking lead.
Yes,
For
you
me.
know like George Clooney, you know stuff like that.
Everybody's type is different. Aren't
It is. It is. See, but you notice he's not blue-eyed blonde hair, but I still like
true.
him.
True. Okay. Okay, so what turns you off to a movie aside from, the
I
whole
think
the
the
leads
genre,
plays a big. Oh, okay.
yes.
Okay.
When I was younger, I enjoyed horror films. Now I cannot watch horror films. So if it's anything scary, I probably won't watch it. And I think like the sci-fi stuff that doesn't interest me. Yeah.
Just not engaging story-wise for you, I
No,
imagine.
no. Which is weird because like with TV shows, um, I got all into the Big Bang Theory, you know, the comedy show,
Yeah.
you know, and those were nerds and all that stuff, but I just found it fascinating to the point where like I'd only seen one episode and then so when it went off air, I actually watched it from the beginning and watched every single episode. So like, you know, I just think it just depends.
I like what PJ put in the chat because I resonate with this. He said, I think it depends on characters in the story. The more I have some common interest with the character or I see them grow in the show, it hooks me even longer in how they interact with others. I feel like that is also why um, K drama has kind of exploded in the way that no, you disagree?
Nah, nah,
You
I'm not
disagree?
into that stuff.
I mean, I'm not either. There are select few that I've enjoyed. It's just it's what makes it hard for me is I think we're on the same page with this because we've talked about it before. It's the reading that can make it difficult. That's like the hurdle that you
Yes.
kind of have to face that. But I've also enjoyed movies that have had subtitles. It's like a 3 hour long movie. I remember like watching it before, but because the story was so engaging, I was just like, I
Yeah.
have to finish this.
Like, I don't mind subtitles. Like, if I'm in a movie theater, I don't mind doing subtitles because I am sitting down just reading it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But when I'm at home, I do other things. So being glued to a TV and reading, it's not really a thing. Plus, I've
Hmm.
seen like how addicting it can be. One of my sisters is all into that whole K drama. She will literally not go to sleep and stay up all night
Yeah.
binge watching all that stuff. And I'm like,
That's the
yeah,
common symptom that I've
yeah, I don't
seen
have time for
with
that.
it. I mean, I was like that though with books. I was like that with books because there's certain like series that I've read that I just couldn't put the book down, and I would literally wake up at I would be awake until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I would have to wake up for school at like 7,
Yes,
which I don't
I've done that with
recommend
books
doing.
too. I've done that with books too, especially if it's like really interesting. Yes.
Yeah. What about you, Nate? Who's just joined us with a fresh, fresh look. His hair's really nice.
I agree with everything. Actually, I don't know what y'all talking about.
We're kind of in the mix now of talking about like our I don't know what you prefer in terms of different modes of storytelling. Like, are you more of a movie, TV, book person? I know you're also really great at conversations too, Nate. You have a lot of fun stories, I think, as well.
Oh yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I do love hearing stories from people though, just like regular, ordinary people. Doesn't have to be, anything anybody special. Not to say that, I don't value their stories, but it's like I get more inspiration knowing that it's real and that it is just kind of an ordinary person that has kind of an incredible story. So I think I kind of lean toward that. I used to be really into books. I used to read a lot of books, not so much anymore. Right? I just don't have time or the attention span for it. But I really love movies. Like originally, I wanted to be a movie director, so I have uh,
Ooh.
a really keen eye for like the presentation. How they frame the cameras, special effects, and all that. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
So does that affect the storytelling more for you, Nate, than the actual story itself? Like, does that kind of jar you a bit when you're watching a movie and you can kind of pick out those things you're like, oh, I don't like how they did that angle. I think that angle could have been done better. Or does the story still captivate you regardless?
Oh, absolutely. I wrote a college paper just on like how camera focus can affect a story and how that's used. And like when it comes to movies, you have to be a
Aren't you
lot
like, no?
more you have to be a lot more thoughtful when you put together a movie because especially nowadays with special effects and they keep pushing the bar as far as like what movies are able to do. So there really is a lot more to movies, I think, than books. Books, you kind of have to use your imagination, but I think the words are a limiting factor because
Really?
yes, especially with modern movies, because you can just put so much on a screen that you cannot. I mean, if you had to describe everything that was going on a screen into a book, like, that would go on for, like, ages because there's just so much information now that you can put into filmmaking compared to books. And I think that probably changed about, I don't know, maybe like the '90s, 2000s when special effects really started to take off. That's when I think, like, the gap started to close and even, like, movies would become, like, a far more superior storytelling, medium.
So what would be, I guess, something that would captivate you, like when you go into movie theater? What's the thing that would hook you versus you like checking out in the first 30 minutes with the those other technical things aside when it
I
comes
mean,
to
I
the
love
actual
movies. I mean,
story?
it could even be a bad movie.
Really?
Yeah, because you could just laugh at just how absurd it is or how bad it is. You can't say the same thing about a book. If a book is bad, it's like I'm not finishing this. I don't have time for this. Or if it's
No.
like a bad story, you can't like pay attention. But I think movies are the only medium you can get away with that it can be bad and you can still like kind of I don't know enjoy watching a dumpster fire.
No. I think for me, once like the 5-10 minute mark hits and it just doesn't interest me, I will turn it off and find someone else. Now, if you're in a movie theater, then you kind of have no choice. You're already there. You already bought the
I was
ticket. So
about to
yes,
ask.
you're gonna sit through that, right? But when I'm going through the different apps on TV and I see something and I'm thinking, oh, it's gonna be a good movie, and then it's not. Oh no, I just get out of it and find something else.
I somewhat agree with that, but like some of the 80s horror movies are like really bad, and they're just
Really?
so bad you
I've
can
never
just
seen them.
Like which
enjoy.
one? Name me a
I've
bad
never
one.
seen them.
I can't think off the top of my head. There's just like even the
Just
names
the
don't even stick.
effects.
It's like let's just pick this movie and let's just watch it, and you're just like this is absurd, and you're like
Well,
laughing at it. But like there's also movies that are like really highly polished, like The Flash comes to mind. One of the Flash movies that came out recently, and it was like you, Arnie. Like the first 5-10 minutes in, I'm like, I'm not watching this anymore. I mean, it's
Mm.
like there's so much in the movie. There's a whole lot of special effects, but it's like this is just not good. It's not even good in a bad way, and I had to turn it off. I couldn't even watch it.
see,
Mm.
with I guess the movies back then, they didn't have as many special effects. Like if you had a scary person, it really was the costume or whatever it was they had, where they didn't really have all these effects. But I thought they were still pretty good. So for me, the whole effects thing, I mean, it's great if it's there, but it's
Yeah.
not like
Well,
I
and
love
that's what you can appreciate about movies too, is that you could see the great lengths they went, and like you say, practical effects in the 80s. It has like a completely different vibe and
Yeah.
feel to it than if you use like CGI. And you'll even see some like modern filmmakers, they really want to make sure that they don't use CGI.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying like it's bad to use CGI. It's just you have to know what you have, and you have to use it, you have to use it well.
Yeah, because Superman, like the old Superman when it was still Christopher Reeves, when you watch those movies, like they didn't have all the special effects, right? It literally was him being hoisted so that he could fly, right? But it was still good, compared to now where they have all these other things, but it doesn't necessarily make it great.
I think it can be overdone too, because there's some
Mhm.
times where it takes me out. Like there's certain movies where I'm like, oh, this is too much. Like it's too stimulating to my eyes, and I'm like, I kind of have to like close my eyes for a bit. 'Cause it just becomes too much. I feel like when you overuse it too, like and with the intent of trying to make it better, just like I see what you're trying to go for, but I'm not feeling it. Like it makes me it's a turn off for me. I think in that
Yeah,
case.
and I think it also depends on the movie type. For example, like
Hmm.
like the Matrix, they had a whole bunch of different effects, right?
Yeah.
But it goes with the movie.
Yeah, there's a
You know what
certain
I'm saying?
flow, like a pacing to it,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just the
But if
first
you were to
one.
just put it on the
Just the
well, that it
first.
was the only one I watched. I did not know there's other ones. That is the only one I've watched.
You should just leave it that way.
You have issues with the second one, Nate?
Yeah, and I feel like they became a product of they suffered from their own success. And you can
Mm,
kind of see that in some filmmakers. It's like when they don't have money and they struggle, that's when they really are trying to put a lot of thoughtful effort into what they're making. And then you
yeah.
see some directors later on, once they have all the money, they get real lazy.
Mm,
See,
I can
and
see that.
that's something kind of like what EJ had put in the chat, like the sequels. Like, well, he's saying just horror movie sequels. A lot of them were bad, right? But then there were some part two movies that, yeah, they should have just left it at one. It didn't matter that one made a lot of money. They should have just left it at that and
Yeah.
didn't do a part two, part three, and all that stuff.
Like Jaws. Like you would think like just don't go in the water.
Yeah,
Don't go
all
in the
I know is
water 4 times.
I've only seen Jaws once. I mean, just number one. I didn't see.
I've never seen.
Okay,
You
girl,
never
you
seen
need
the
to start
first
watching
Jaws?
these movies.
No.
You got have
I told you I'm not a super movie person. I will
well,
watch TV
yeah.
shows.
Okay, you got to watch Sweet Home Alabama, like I said, but you got to watch Jaws.
Yeah,
I need to
I don't
watch
know.
Superman. I've never seen. I
You
feel
just
like I've only watched the original Superman movie when I was like a kid in like bits and pieces.
oh
Mhm.
no, the one with Christopher Reeves is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
The first
Of
one,
course, you're
yeah.
saying that based off of your lead-in from earlier, aren't you?
No, because I think no, because I watched that when I was a kid,
But
and
that's the thing too. Like sometimes your nostalgia it deceives
Clouds.
you
Yeah.
when you look back because
no, because I have watched it again, like when they kind of do reruns and show it, and I've
yeah,
watched it a few times, and
and
I
it held
still
up.
like. Yeah, I still liked his Superman compared to all the other ones that like comes out. Now, I must say the Lois and Clark was pretty good because Dean Cain is good looking, but the original Superman is still the original Superman.
See, that's where like I remember the Ninja Turtles cartoon from like the 90s. I remember like being I remember loving that show when I was a kid, and then I remember trying to show my son the show. Like, oh, you got to watch this; it's so cool. And then I'm watching it, I'm like, this show is garbage. Like, why did I ever think this was entertaining? So that's
It's
another thing about like
entertaining.
storytelling. It's like maybe at the time of your life, like you can appreciate it, but then sometimes it's like it's not as good when you revisit it, and your nostalgia kind of betrays you.
It serves the purpose for the time that you're receiving it, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Where your mind is at, experience wise, level wise. Because I think also like with I feel like the reverse works with me now too. I feel like when I watch younger shows now, like the more like kids shows, I feel like it can kind of take me back a little bit to more like childish. But then when I watch more adult shows now, I'm like, this is too real for me. Like this is like also too much.
I don't know.
Like
I don't
reality.
like the kids shows that they have now. I remember we had some good
There's some that I
cartoons.
do like. There's some that I do like. But I also watch because they have I like with the streaming services now you're able to watch some of the childhood shows. There's some good ones that they're still out there.
You know what's interesting though, when you watch something from your childhood and you appreciated the story at that time, and then when you're an adult and you understand things better and you have like a new appreciation for it in a different way. So
Hmm.
like I think like Top Gun comes to mind. When I was a kid, I was like, oh, cool, jet planes. And then when you're older, you're like, oh, there's like a deeper story to this of like, a person who's struggling from like trying to escape his past. And then he's trying to, get through this fighter school. So it's like you can also revisit stories, especially, when you have a better understanding of the world, and you can gain like a new appreciation for those stories.
Super agree. I feel like and going back to character development because of Melanie's comment, because she put there like when stories, books, movies have good character development. I feel like that's what makes stories memorable for me. It's always the goes to the character. I don't
Yeah.
always remember the whole story, like the events and the sequences of everything, but a really good character, even it's super simple, like super simple story. They could be in one room for like the whole movie. I feel like it would keep me engaged the whole time.
And the characters are memorable when you refer to them as the character and not the actor or actress who played them.
Yes, agree.
That's how, yeah, because that's how I see when because sometimes I don't even know who the actor or the actress is, but I remember the character and I always refer to the character and not who played them.
Nate, no. He's silent, so I really can't.
He's more technical. He likes the technical
Yeah,
stuff.
I
If
think
you notice,
yeah.
like
It's
like
the
even in the
director in him.
angle, right? For me, I don't look at the angle. Whatever the angle is, what it is, as long as it's got a good story.
But I feel like that also drives good directing, doesn't it? I feel like when a director really understands like the motivations of the characters, they can properly, you know, get the actors to kind of move. I feel like that's why I appreciate television. Because with television, at least from the different commentaries that I've listened to with different shows that I've liked, they break down of how difficult it is to go from like week to week. Because you have like this production of like 8 days typically, and then you're trying to produce for like let's say it's a 24 episode season, and the turnaround rate that they have to go to be able to get these to air week after week, it's really it's really tight. That's why like the schedule is like so grueling. But
See,
then
I have a love-hate relationship with TV, but finish
oh
your thought.
well, that's why I appreciate it, because I don't love a lot of TV, but the TV that I do appreciate is the way that they can craft a story, even if it's just there's the stories that I like are seasons where they don't do a full 24 episode season. The ones that I really appreciate lately are ones that do, let's say, 1 to 10 or 1 to 12, and they will initiate, or like the the seed is planted, let's say in like season 1, and you will still see the effects of that all the way up to like season 6, and you're like, "Wow." That's what I'm, because if I feel like you have so much more room with TV as opposed to movies, of course, right? Because you're just producing more and more. It creates a lot more room for error, which I feel like is where Nate's gonna go with that, like some inconsistencies with different details and stuff. But if the directors and like the core team are really good about, keeping true to the details of everything, it can be really amazing. There's some TV shows that come to mind, but yeah. Okay, so what's your what's your beef? Your love hate.
Okay, so with like TV shows, they have to, especially like if they're still following a model when they're going to be on network television, then they start having to be forced into like a structure, like you said, like 1 hour episodes. And so now they're either trying to shrink a story into individual episodes, or they're trying to stretch something out to fill the episode or even the whole season. Like The Walking Dead comes to mind. Like 4 seasons, 5 seasons in, and I quit because it's like they're just drawing this thing out on purpose. It's like they're wanting to get paid, they're wanting to renew a contract. This story is going nowhere, and you're just dragging this thing out. Other shows like Lost, I remember it just kept dragging out, and it's like I feel like a lot of these modern shows, they started out really strong, they captivated audience with like their premise, the story, the characters, all great, and then they just reach a point where it's like we don't know how to finish this thing, we don't know where it's going to go. We have to stretch it out this many seasons because we want to be paid for 10 seasons and not for 5, right? So that's my problem kind of with TV versus like a movie. It's like it's a little more open, so you can, typically get like 2 hours to make a movie. If you're a good director, they'll trust you with like 3, or sequels and all that. um but yeah, it's just too constricted when it comes to TV. There's only like a small handful of shows that I like actually enjoyed, where they were good enough to where those limitations, those confines of like the timing and the seasons, don't get in the way of the story.
I just want to say, I think it's hilarious that you, because for those who don't know, Melanie in the chat is Nate's wife, and I think it's hilarious that you guys commented the same exact thing.
See, but you know what? I think it just depends on the show that you're watching, because like there was this one show I just watched one episode, and then I ended up binge watching the whole season, like Prison Break. They had 5 seasons, but from when it started to when it ended, it was good. Like literally, like it wasn't just me, like my aunts were watching with me, my sisters, and we would stay up all night, all just to watch every episode. And then we even did the whole thing like, don't you guys be watching it until we're all together again. And that's what we had to do. But that was one that I thought was pretty good, that just
I
it,
thought
it
Prison
didn't
Break was
stretch
good for like, I think it was like a season or two, until they broke out of prison. I'm like, well, the show should be done. They
but,
kept
but
going.
they
They had
ended
other
up putting him
storylines.
back in prison, so it was actually pretty good.
I
So
couldn't finish it. That was the same thing. I reached a point where I'm like, stop drawing these episodes out. Quit leaving me on
Yeah,
like unnecessary cliffhangers.
and that's
that's
why I
fair.
think comedies work, because like especially when they're only 30 minutes, because
Right.
Mhm.
sometimes they don't even have to relate to the previous episodes. It could just be a whole nother thing, and that's why I like comedy. So that's what I really watch. I don't really do the whole sci-fi thing and all that. Murder mystery sometimes, but mostly comedy.
Is there any? I know, Arnie, you mentioned yours already. Nate, is there any genres that you stay away from? I feel like I asked you this before, but I'm not sure.
Any genres not really. I mean, I kind of go through like phases where like I really want to deep dive into like a specific genre, and then, try to watch everything on it, try to, watch the most iconic works, from that genre, and then try to move on to something else. I mean, there's only a few, maybe like fantasy. I have really tough time getting into just the whole like old British English and wizards and dragons. Like I think the closest thing I liked was I think it was the one with Matthew McConaughey where it was more of modern times and those dragons, but that's kind of cheating.
Mm. I don't know that one.
I don't know that
And
one.
he's like, nah.
Yeah, I don't do dragons. I don't do Potter, Harry.
No judgment. Not gonna.
No,
I will say
seriously,
though. No,
I have
what
not
was that?
watched one episode of it. Not even like one.
That's
One.
okay.
How many movies do they have?
8, even though there's 7 books. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I have not watched one
no
movie in
judgment.
length.
No
Mm-mm.
judgment. I'm just choosing that. I'm choosing no judgment. Even though I enjoy. No, that's one of the series that actually kept me up because like just the pros of it and the connections of everything. I think it was EJ who commented it earlier. I don't know how you guys feel about adaptations. Like you do you guys have you guys read books that were adapted into movies and then you're like, "Oh no." What is this dumpster
Yes.
fire? To put it in Nate's
Yes.
words.
There's a lot to say on adaptations because they can go in so many ways, and it really depends on several factors like do they just own the rights to the story and they just want to put it out because they know people will watch it. Is it a passion project of a director who's actually going to do a good job and portray the story correctly and accurately? There's a small handful of times when the actual author would be involved in the movie making process, so it really runs like a whole range of quality of storytelling. You're never going to be guaranteed that an adaptation of a book will make a good movie. And there's one instance that I know where the director actually did a better job than the book, and even the author agreed that the director did a better job.
And what
Really?
book is
Yes.
that?
I can't mention it on air.
Oh,
Oh.
Say that.
okay.
No, because
You
because
want to
that's the
know?
thing. I do read a lot of the books and then I do watch the movie, or sometimes I'll watch the movie and then I'll read the book. But I find that I think I enjoy the books more than
Hmm.
the movie. Because, like, especially when you read the book and we're like, oh, that's not what happened in the movie. It's not that
Yeah.
good, right? But the book, or if you read the book first and then watch the movie later, you're like, oh, they forgot this or they forgot this, right? But I found that a lot of the books I liked better as a book. I mean, but don't get me wrong, the movie wasn't bad. I just
Hmm.
enjoyed the book more than the movie.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like a lot of movies are actually based on books. Like they
Hmm.
actually take the source material from the book, they make it into a movie, and sometimes the movie is so much better you don't even know it's associated with the book. Like I know the book, like the Rambo series, like the first Rambo movie, that was actually based on a book. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows it was
Mm-mm.
a book originally.
Mm.
So that's where it gets back to where like when it comes to adaptations, I really believe it's on the caliber of your director and your
Yeah.
production team, because there's I mean it's a business, right? So this is where storytelling kind of gets ruined, where there's more of a motivation just to make money than to actually tell a story.
I think that's true for what you said too about TV earlier, because all of them have their own unique, I think, ways of being able to tell a story. Like with books, you really get the full detail of everything, and I feel like the author is able to kind of guide you more in the lens of what they want you um, to know, right? But when you're watching visually, like with TV or with movies, there's some details that we don't always pick up the first time. Like, have you ever like rewatched a TV show or a movie? And you're like, oh, I didn't know. Like, there's some movies where you realize at the end you missed all of the clues that were hinting at that thing. Like, you guys watched Shutter Island? Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
Maybe. Oh, okay.
That one I've
But
read the
it's
book and watched the movie.
oh, I didn't even know that was a book.
Yes. That's a
It just grew
shame
up in
too,
your
because
book.
the author is actually really good. He's really well known.
But yeah, I guess it's they all have like their unique, I guess, ways of being able to storytell. I think that's what I appreciate about TV and movies because it's so much more nuanced with um you have to be the one to kind of see the details. Like it's kind of on you. Whereas books, it's more like laid out for you, like, oh, this is like this thing. I think that can be true too, like reading between the lines, but I feel like it's more clearer, and then you realize things later on. But your point with where knowing when to stop, knowing when the story should stop, and don't like squeeze everything out of it is
Onto
where.
that same point, like when you pick up on new details, like a lot of movies in the 2000s, they had really, really thoughtful directors who were always putting things in the movies to where like you would never catch it, the first time you watch it. But then once you had the
Hmm.
whole total story and then you
Yeah.
rewatch it, you would catch those details. And I feel like
Hmm.
some directors still do that now, but a lot of directors don't. They don't have time. They realize the audience not really gonna sit down and rewatch it because that's another thing too with like um the method that we consume movies through like streaming, and there's so many options versus back then everything was slowed down a lot more.
Yeah.
You rented maybe one movie and you would have it for several days, and typically you'd watch it more than once. And you would have a movie collection, and you just didn't have complete access to everything.
Hmm.
Uh so that you never had the need to feel like you had to always watch the next thing because there was always something new to watch. It's like you only had a limited choice in front of you. So what choice did you have other than to rewatch, movies?
Yeah, that's a good point. Just because it kind of, I think, puts pressure on the actual storytellers now, right? Because they're always trying to think of coming up with the next thing. I feel like that's why we have so many reboots of everything. Like everywhere I look, there's a reboot, like there's either a reboot or like a sequel or like a
Right.
how many years later
You
kind
know what
of.
I don't like is when people actually complain about reboots. Like
Uh oh.
because it's I don't know. For me, it's like it's too basic of an argument to be like they should never remake movies. And it's like a lot of the movies that you think are really iconic are actually remakes. Like the Wizard of Oz, the one that everyone knows, right? That
Hmm.
everyone has seen. I think that's like the third or fourth or fifth remake of that movie. That's not even like the
No,
first one.
for me, it's not remake. It's like the 10 years later, like kind of like sequel thing. Like, I'm trying to think of a.
To
There's one
reboot
that
it,
I
like
not just
Spider
to
Man.
reboot it, but it's like it's not even like retelling of the old story. It's just like I don't know. I think there's a point where sometimes it's like when you get to like number five, like five for movies, and like you're like how many years in? Like let's say the first movie started in like 2000, right?
Hmm.
And then we're here already at 2025, and then you have like 25 years worth of this movie, and you're on like number five now. So like every 5 years, there's I'm not trying to attack certain series, but there's just sometimes we're just like really they have more like they have more still for the story. I guess that's kind of my version of your TV of the over drawn out kind of thing. Not necessarily the reboots of like redoing old series, but just like drawing out the
Yeah.
length of
I
certain
feel like that
stories.
was Star Wars in like so
Yeah,
many levels.
kind of. But no
Yeah,
hate.
I think I
Anyway.
only watched the original Star Wars. I didn't watch anything else after that.
You should probably leave it that way.
No, seriously, like all the other ones that's come out, I've only no, I think I've only done Star Wars and then Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back. After those three, I have not seen any other Star Wars movies.
Yeah, I feel like they got kind of lazy and they knew they were sitting on a cash cow, so kind of phoned they kind of phoned some of those movies in, I think.
It's
Yeah.
kind of sad though. No, because like being able to run into a good story, do you feel like that's sparse nowadays? Like, do you find it hard to find a movie really that really wows you? Like, have you gone to a theater recently or watched a TV show where you're like, wow, like that was life changing? No,
Mhm.
or like not life changing, but memorable. You're like, wow, I really
Yeah,
like that one.
maybe not so much nowadays. I feel like it's a lot rarer, especially the ratio between really good stories and just a whole bunch of recycled, rehashed, stuff. Um, yeah, I'm still waiting for kind of like the movie industry to kind of figure out that like people want stories, people don't want to be preached to, I guess, because a lot of
Mhm.
movies nowadays are trying to like really like make you like think a certain way
Agenda.
and agree with an agenda with certain morals, versus like back then they would kind of like just present you a case like, hey, what if this happened, and they make you think more, like, they try to like challenge you as far as like your morals, be like, what would you do in this situation, versus saying like, well, you have to do this.
And I think back then it was more for entertainment, like, even if it didn't have any kind of message, as long as it was entertaining, those are the types of movies I watch, because with life everything's so serious and everything like that, and so to be able to escape for like an hour or 2 hours and forget about life, and see what a perfect world looks like, kind of a thing, that's what I like about movies.
Mm. It's interesting. EJ put in. I hope you can explain this in the live chat, EJ. But not cinema movies, but YouTube passion projects. Those have more of an impact for me. Have you guys come across those
Oh
passion
yeah,
projects on YouTube?
absolutely. Yeah, where
What does
it's
that
just
look like?
kind of like a small team. I mean, it's basically independently produced, you know, movies that, and this is what has been great about YouTube, is that it allows, uh, storytellers, filmmakers to have access to the public, basically. Versus back then, if you wanted to distribute something you made yourself, it'd be very, very difficult. Like you can make a whole
Mhm.
bunch of videotapes and then you could try to sell them out of a van or something, or sell them to like video rental stores. But
Yeah,
now, like, people who have really good ideas can now put them onto YouTube.
yeah, that's true. Arnie, you were laughing.
No, because it's like they got on VHS. You gotta sell it on the back of the van. How scary is that?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it'll look friendly. I would hope. Um. Okay, so this is something that came to mind because you know there's a lot of I've seen this in movies, I've seen this in TV shows, I've seen this in books, and I think you kind of touched on it earlier, Nate, where like but this is further in because I think earlier you were mentioning you're like 10 or 30 minutes in and then you stop. What is like an ending that is like, oh, that ruins it for me? Like you go through the whole thing, like thinking that this is leading up to something really great, and then you get to the ending, and you're like, ah, really?
For me, if it's not a happy ending, I don't like it.
Mm,
Or if you have different characters and you were expecting them to end up with one and they ended up with the other, like, yeah, no, that wasn't good.
the love triangle.
I think it depends. Like, depends on like how the story goes, because I've seen some movies where like the ending just abruptly ends, and
Yeah.
it's kind of jarring at first. You're like, why did that just happen? Like, did my movie just break? Because it literally just shut off. And sometimes directors are trying to make a statement, so sometimes you have to read deeper into the production, and like think about like, okay, well, why did the director do that? Maybe he had a reason. Some endings though can be very like unsatisfactory, because it's like, in the end, these movies kind of create their own worlds and then they play by these rules. And like sometimes really bad movies would be inconsistent about following those rules, so that when you get to an ending, you're like, where did this come from? And what did this accomplish? Or it's like you're clearly trying to tell a story and you're trying to get to a point, but then you don't accomplish it. I mean, it really depends on like what you're getting into. I've seen some slice of life movies. That's the best way I can describe it, where it's just like 2 hours of showing like somebody in their life and what they're going through, and it's just beginning and end. And really, the movie's not about like any kind of real story where there's like a conclusion, but you're just observing like what this person is going through and how this character reacts to sometimes just their everyday life. And I've seen movies like that. I mean, it just depends. Like I said, I've seen all sorts of types of movies. And
I think the other ending I don't like is, let's say you're watching a series, right? And all of a sudden they got canceled. And so they just never finished it. So then there's never a real ending. That I don't like.
Yeah,
And,
that's the
at
worst.
least with some of the series where they knew this was going to be their last season, they ended up, they end the story. They either they go their separate ways, or, stuff like that. But when the series ends, and you're hoping that another season was coming and then it got canceled. That's like the worst ending ever.
Yeah, it's always a shame. And sometimes when there's like an ending you have to interpret because it's not quite clear what happened, if it goes one way or
Mhm.
another. Either that can be good because it's like you have a discussion afterwards, or it can be bad because like especially if it's like a relationship movie, like, well, what happened? We want to know you're invested in this character and now you really want to see the best outcome, but then they just leave you kind of on a, it can go either way, bud.
It's up to you. Pick your own adventure, kind of thing. I don't like the ones where it was all a dream. It's like the character just wakes up and it's like I feel like that's such a cop out. Like, really? It's like, man, I just watched how many hours and it was all a dream. No thanks.
That was like every other children's movie, wasn't it? Like in the 80s. They were doing
I feel
that.
like that's more acceptable just because I don't know, for like children's it's more simpler, but I feel like for the more complex like stories and everything, it's just like, so you're telling me all of that like angst and all of that drama was for nothing? Like
But
you put
did
my
you
emotions through all of that for nothing?
I mean, there's also the movie Inception, which technically, like, the whole movie is a dream.
I mean, that one's I feel like okay, maybe I need to I should correct my words. I actually like that movie. But cuz that was but that was different
Oh,
because
there's
that
also
was the
some
whole
movies where you don't know if they're dreaming, if they ever wake up. Those are kinda interesting.
and he's like, "No."
I don't know
Disagree?
what movies. I don't know what movies those are.
Okay. All right. No judgment. No judgment. All of our opinions there. We're just sharing. We're just sharing our preferences and everything. But um the last thing I want to ask you guys is like the best, I guess, lesson that you've learned from a story where it could be, from a movie, TV show, even in conversation. Because I know we before you came earlier, Nate, we were talking about conversations and I the Arnie doesn't like the ones where they sound like they're done, but then they keep adding on and adding on and adding on, and then it sounds like they're finished, but they're not. But I think what's really cool about storytelling is that, at least for me, I feel like that's why I appreciate character development because I can always kind of learn something from whatever the person is going through. It could be like a crazy thing or whatever. So, is there any lessons that come to mind that you guys have taken from a story? You're like, wow, that really made me think. Because you were kind of mentioning that earlier, Nate, where there's some movies that kind of make you think, what would you do in that situation? Or Arnie?
I would say the movie/book, I believe it's called Unbroken. It takes place in World War II,
Yeah.
and actually the movie is like a great disservice to that book. I hate the
Oh, is it
I saw
really?
the movie, I hated it so much. It was, if you like the movie, then you're gonna love the book, like, way better, but what I got the most out of that was just how much a person can endure. So, you know, without giving too much, like it takes place during World War II. I believe he was a sprinter at the time. He joins the military as part of the war. He's part of a flight crew, probably a bomber. I think a bomber crew, and their plane gets shot down in shark infested waters. And not only is he surviving out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which is already something incredible. Like I can't even imagine if you stick me in a life raft in the middle of the Pacific that I would survive. Then he gets attacked by sharks, and then the Japanese find him, and they don't treat him any better either. They treat him worse. And then he goes to a Japanese prison camp, and he just makes it through all of it. And I always go back to that book, and anytime I'm having like a bad day, I'm like, well, at least I'm not in the middle of the Pacific in a pontoon boat, something like it's something that reminds me like I can get through this because people have been able to get through a whole lot worse. So that's where my favorite stories are always about people who go through extraordinary things and are able to get through them.
I actually had that book and I need to buy a different copy because I started reading it and then I lost it. I started reading that in high school. It's so long ago. I'm glad that you reminded me about it because it's just really like the writing is really good in it. Yeah. Not that we're promoting anything special, but yeah. Anyway, Arnie.
I don't know. I think I'm just so old now that I forgot all the stuff. No, I'm not kidding. Because well, Nate's trying to tell a story. I'm like, what?
You're
Like,
calling yourself old like every week, I feel. Like, what is this?
because if you really knew how old I was, no, but seriously, like, I'm trying to think because I know there's lots of stories out there that I enjoy, and I know there's a lot of things I learned from different stories. I just can't remember like one particular story like Nate does.
No, it doesn't have to be the story itself, but just like any takeaway, any lesson. No, nothing.
Mm, mm,
Not
Or
even
you're
the
like,
Disney movies. I know you're a big Disney fan.
yeah.
I am, but they're all just feel good. They're all feel good stuff. Oh, okay, sure. You want to know what I learned from Disney stories? They lied to us when we were kids. Okay, there are no such thing as you're going to marry a prince, and just because you lose your shoe, or you know, or you're a
I don't think that was
commoner, and
exactly the point
you're
of
gonna
that
find
story.
that you're Prince Charming, right? I don't know if Prince Charmings actually exist.
Notice that they were all called like Prince Charming. Like, did they actually have names? I think
Yes,
there was a couple. There's a couple that had names, but did all of
I
them have
think
names?
the early days they were all just Prince Charming, but then after a while they
Oh,
started having names like Prince Eric, and
right. Yeah.
yeah, and
That's the
I
only
can't
one I could
remember
think of.
Rapunzel. Rapunzel, I can't remember his, but he's not a prince. But like that. I mean, you know,
It reminds me of like when the internet was criticizing Beauty and the Beast. They're like, what was wrong with Gaston? Like this guy had his, he was well put together. He works out, he eats well, he eats a dozen eggs every day, right? So, and then you have the Beast who's like this recluse and he has this like big castle and he just like wastes it away. And it's like, what kind of moral were they trying to teach the kids in this movie?
that's a whole nother topic. No, and the thing is, if you're just watching it for what it is, it's fine. But when you see like the different things of those stories, yeah, it does make you think. I think as an adult, it'll make you think, but I think for the kids, just because it's colorful and it's got the songs, then it's just enjoyable. And then like the different characters, especially like the little animals that could talk, or even though they shouldn't be able to talk, but stuff like that.
Yeah, I think in any medium, we didn't get to touch on music, but I think even some like musicals. I like musicals a lot. I don't know if that's its own thing or if that's filed under the movies in terms of
Yeah.
storytelling.
When did musicals stop rhyming? That's what I noticed. There's a lot of modern musicals. They stop
Good
rhyming.
gosh. I
Why
don't
did
know.
they
There's
rhyme
some that don't
before?
rhyme.
Yes, like all the old musicals, like when they would sing, they would actually rhyme. Then all of a
Do
sudden
they
they
not
stop.
rhyme anymore? Some
No,
don't.
they don't. I mean, I don't know. The musicals I've seen, none of them rhymed. Like when I watch Phantom, I watch Miss Saigon, they're just musicals.
All right, I'll admit that's not a
Oh,
genre I really dug too deeply into.
okay. Well, I just like music a lot. That's why. I'm not like a super into it, but I just know the ones that I like. But anyway, just rounding about everything. I hope that's something that we don't lose. No, being able to tell a good story and like with the good intentions and not doing it for for a quick buck, like squeezing out everything that you can. Like Nate's complaints were about my TV shows earlier, yeah, Arnie, you're about
Yeah,
to say
and
something.
with like some of the stories, I think some of the stories that I find interesting, even though I know they're exaggerating,
Hmm.
I find it interesting to figure out like, okay, so if they didn't exaggerate, would this story have been boring? Why did they have to like exaggerate
Mm.
with the things that they were saying? And so when people exaggerate, I just like inside I want to laugh because I already know like there's no way that could have happened. But then it just makes me think of why would they feel the need to exaggerate? Is it just
Mm.
to make it better?
Something else to consider with our own storytelling, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the last Mission Impossible. I did not like it.
I didn't watch,
Oh, the
but
new
thanks for
one?
the tip.
Yeah, the newest one.
Oh, I haven't seen it. I
I,
haven't
I
seen it.
think it's worth watching. There's really good action, but a lot of the story is just like, okay, this impossible thing needs to happen, but then like seven other impossible things need to happen also. And you're like, all right, All right, I don't believe this story anymore. This is too much.
Yeah, I think I've only watched one Mission Impossible also. The first
Oh,
one.
really?
Yeah, I don't think I've watched the other ones. The only ones that I watched multiples like 007. Because those ones, whether it was Sean Connery from back in the days to, all the different ones they had now, yeah,
0.
007s.
Nothing. Nada. But everybody prefers, I guess, different stories. But there's always something to learn, I guess, from stories. Different things.
Because
Yeah.
I like the ones that are where you kind of have to think who is the bad guy. You know what I'm saying? Like they threw out the story, and it's always going to be a twist on who the bad guy is. But just trying to figure that out even from the start, I find those interesting.
Oh, that's Mission Impossible 3, 4, and 5. Yeah, you need to
Yes,
see
you did.
those.
I didn't even know there was that many.
Yeah. There are.
Yeah, that was a weird case where like the middle ones were the best of the series.
I actually, yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. I think that's my first time agreeing with you on
Yeah,
anything in today's
and then Mission
today's
Impossible
broadcast.
2 is just like a commercial for the 2000s. Like it's like
Yeah,
really absurd. Yeah.
but again, everybody's preferences are different. But I hope everyone got like some good recs today from our talk, and that you continue to keep telling stories too. Thanks for telling your stories, guys, today in the hangouts, and then those in the live chat as well. Thanks to PJ, EJ, and also to Melanie and Oliver. We didn't get to read all of your comments, but thanks for tuning in with us, everyone. We hope to see you again same time next week here on Chatline, and have a good weekend, everyone. Take care. Go listen to more stories. Go tell more stories. Got the queen waving her hand and
It's the
Arnie.
princess wave. It's not
I'm
the
sorry,
queen. The queens, yeah,
the
the princess.
princess. The
I thought that
princess.
was the
I'm sorry.
Queen. The Queen did that.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Maybe the real queen, but in the cartoons, it's a princess as you wave like this.
Yeah, the Queen of
Royalty.
England, the former Queen of England.
Royalty. Bye, everyone. We should make this our wave, I guess.
Let me always dwell in the temple of the
Nate-